Down D-Gens. Couple things I want to go over today, guys. Try to make it quick, but it's probably going to be a little bit of a longer video if you're in a rush. I suggest wait till you're taking a shit and, take your time together with me as we're going over some stats. Not really any picks this week. We've pretty much put all of our picks out for week one. We'll recap them, we'll put them in the comments, all that kind of good stuff, but not really anything being added right now. I will say, just kind of as a recap to the preseason, obviously preseason's over. We wrapped it up with a push, unfortunately, which, I guess it's better than a loss, right? But the Chargers-Saints game, under 37, ended at exactly 37, so we get the push. Brings our record to 6-1-1 for the preseason, so we do finish preseason up 4.9 units, which is great because we are playing roughly about 6 units for week one, if you are following all of the plays. If not, obviously you can just do 4 plays or 5 plays or whatever you want to do to just kind of use the preseason money and let the bankroll do itself. A couple things I want to go over today. Like I said, number one, want to go over the grading algorithm or the coaching grade algorithm. If you are newer to the channel, I know I picked up a lot of followers over the last month or so, just as we're getting into football season. My main niche within football is coaching stats, coaching trends, kind of knowing more or less what to expect with certain coaches. It does us really, really well in the preseason because we kind of know at least some of their intentions. As far as regular season, harder to know obviously what they're going to do. We can kind of think we know what they're going to do or give them some ideas, but the rational coaching theory is kind of out the window. So what do we use instead? Well, I have an algorithm that I made. It's proprietary in the fact that I made it, but it's free. So I'll give it to you if you want it. I show it every week on here. It's in the book I have. I'll put the book in the comments below as well. So in that book, the book is also free. It shows you how to make this algorithm if you want to. If you don't want to, if math isn't your thing, just tune in. I'll show it to you. You don't have to worry about doing all this stuff. But really what this algorithm is, it's kind of taking a conglomeration of all the information, right? So one score games, their early down success rate in runs and passes, their play frequency, so how many times are they passing, are they running, their blitz, their turnover ratios, their QBR. Strength of schedule is in there. It's not as vital to the scoring system, but it is in there for what it's worth. But anyways, all of that is put in there mainly to project a grade. And so once we have this grade, we also turn that grade into expected points. So you're going to multiply this grade by a certain amount of points, and that's how you get your points. So this is your expected points, or like your average points per game, right? What it should be is how I should phrase that. So like in this case, the Rams should have, according to this algorithm, been scoring about 27.79 points per game, or closer to 28, right? About 28 points per game. We have that algorithm done for each and every team. The reason you're seeing those names at the top, the Raiders, the Dolphins, Vikings, all that kind of stuff, they have 0, is because they have received a new coach. And so again, as I mentioned, a lot of this, if not all of it, comes down to the coach. So when they change coaches, we kind of start from scratch. There's some thoughts and some beliefs and things like that I have going in, just doing my research and studying the individual coaches. But until we see how effective they are on the field when they're actually playing a real live game, we can't really credit them with anything. So the 6 teams, or actually I believe it's 8 teams altogether, that have a new coach this year, we're going to start from scratch. Again, we'll kind of touch on that in just a second because those numbers will get filled in relatively quickly. Secondly, though, again, if you're newer to this channel, be aware that the coaching algorithm gains data as we go into the season, making it more and more effective. So by week, let's say 8, the algorithm is pretty much humming along, and it's going to do its thing, and it's going to give us more or less what the expected points should be for each and every team, assuming that they stay healthy and there's not a change in coaching or anything like that. The reason I say that is because, one, it's easy to go out there and look at points per game, right? Why do all this information? Why put all this stuff together when you could just go to points per game? The reason we do that is because this is expected points per game. So kind of like expected, yards per catch or expected yards per rush or whatever, right? And you kind of go off of that to deviate whether they're doing better than average or less than average with what they're given. So let me go through this. Let's see how accurate it was. Now keep in mind, you can double check me on this. I'm showing you this video, but if you don't believe me and if you're like, bullshit, I don't buy it for a second, dude, go back, watch the videos. You can watch them from last year, from the playoffs, prior to the playoffs, or whatever, and look at the numbers. They're the same. It hasn't touched it. I literally just pulled up the same file that we were using last year to go off of. So I'm going to skip these teams here. The blue teams are teams that scored above their expected points per game, and teams that, I mean, really you should know were probably, better than what we thought they were. And I apologize because the Rams are actually not one of those teams. Rams are going to be in green. So the blue is teams that kind of overachieved. The green is teams that achieved exactly or very close to what their expected points per game would be. The red is underperforming. And then the ones in white are really just typically within 2 to 4 points of their expected points per game. So if we look at the Rams, this algorithm again has them at 27.79 points per game. If we come over to Stats Muse, the Rams were at 27.1 points per game. So again, very similar to what they should have been. Just as an example, let's look at the Cowboys, 31.2 points per game. On the algorithm here, it has them at 29.65. So again, within about 2 to 4 points of accuracy per team that's in white here. The Buccaneers, again, obviously, were under the Cowboys on StatMuse, but new coach, so we don't have data to go off of there. Cardinals are at 28.2, and right now I'm just going to kind of give you some examples of what we're working with just to show you at least some of the accuracy here. So 26.4 was their points per game last year. Again, we expected them to be at about 28. So very close, a little under what they should have been expecting, but that's within a standard deviation for this. It's just throughout the season when it comes to actually betting on these teams, one standard deviation is a touchdown, so the full 7 points one way or the other, which is a pretty big swing, right? So from 28 points, that's either 21 to 35. That's a 14-point gap. That's a huge number to go off of when we're talking about NFL. So we use this kind of as a starting point, but then we can also use the rest of the information within the algorithm as far as like coaching tendencies, certain kind of schemes that the coach is running, what kind of personnel they're using, to decide if we believe they're going to go over the expected points value within one standard deviation, or if they're going to stay under within that one standard deviation. And that's going to be a lot of our handicapping. For the first 4 to 6 weeks, the handicapping is mainly done on the Madden algorithm. If you haven't seen that one, it's in prior videos. Go back and watch them. But really, that Madden algorithm is more player-driven and personnel-driven. So for the first couple weeks of the season, while these coaches don't have a lot of stats to go off of, typically it's just like the better talent wins out. And those points kind of, or the algorithm that is driven by Madden is driven by personnel and kind of their rankings and things like that, and gives us at least a grade point expectation. So we just switch over from that to Madden as we get towards the middle of the season and beyond. And as you can see, the numbers are pretty accurate. Again, this is all free information, guys, so take advantage of it while it's here. Not to say that I'm going anywhere, but you never know when this stuff is going to change. If somebody wants to put this behind a paywall or whatever, I'm giving it all out for free. So that all being said, let's go to some of these teams that are in blue, the Chiefs and the Chargers. Per what's on paper, their expected points should have been about 22 points each, right? Expected points per game would be about 22 points. What they actually scored last year, the Chiefs were at 28. The Chargers were, let's just round it and say 28 as well. So they're both about a touchdown above their expected points. Now, you can take that one of two ways. You can take that to say, I believe this is unsustainable and it's going to revert back to the mean. Now 6 points isn't huge. If it was like 17 points, then I would say, yeah, it probably needs to come back. It's going to regress a little bit. But 6 points is like still within that one standard deviation when it comes to betting. However, it is still a full touchdown. So to say that these teams exceeded their expectation is accurate. Now, if we go to the other teams, the Bills and the Patriots, the Bills should have been scoring roughly about 21.5 to 22 points per game. The Patriots were, let's just call it 18. If you look at what they actually scored, we have the Bills at 28 and the Patriots at 27. So pretty big difference from what the expectation is. 7 points for the Bills and about 10 points for the Patriots. So the Patriots probably are due for some regression, but the last team I want to go over here is the Colts. The Colts were expected to have about 20 points per game. When they actually tallied up all the numbers, they were at about 26.5 points per game. So again, about a full touchdown over. One thing you'll notice it's in common with all of these teams that exceeded expectations. One, we consider them to be good teams. Two, they're teams that we've considered to be good for several years. This isn't like a one-time, one-off kind of fluky thing. And then lastly, all of these teams have coaches that I would rank essentially within the top 10. Andy Reid, Brandon Staley, Sean McDermott. That's jury's still out because again, this is going to go back to Brian Daboll for me personally, in my opinion. Bill Belichick, don't need to say much about that. And Frank Reich, another coach that I really hold in high regard. So all these teams pretty well coached, and so we see that those teams come in above their expectation. These green teams here, like the Browns and the 49ers, they were expected to score about 21 and 25 points respectively. The Browns ended up coming in, I believe, exactly the 20.5 that we had expected. And the 49ers also, I believe, come in pretty close, if not exactly, at what we had them. 25.1. So, again, very, very close, if not exactly what we had them expected as, which means that those teams came, and played to expectation, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Again, that's exactly what the Rams did, and they won a Super Bowl that way. So knowing yourself and knowing that you can kind of get to those expected points per game is a good thing because you know the standard and you know the bar that you have to get to win individual games. And if you can be consistent, typically you can win a lot of games that way. So this is just kind of a show in, where this algorithm comes from, and as we get further into the season, where we're going to be looking to get our numbers and how we're going to do our handicapping. But the last thing I want to show you on this before we get into season-long picks is going to be the Broncos and the Falcons. So the Broncos, we expected them to get 28 points per game just per what they put on paper, right? Their EDSR and their one-score win percentage and all that kind of stuff. Falcons at 24 points per game. If you come into what they actually did last year, the Broncos, and again, this is one of the teams that I specifically left on there, didn't put a 0 because I wanted to kind of show what we're looking at here. The Broncos only scored 19 points per game. The Falcons were at 18 points per game. So both of them, the Falcons a one touchdown under expectation. The Broncos even more than that. And you'll notice both of these teams have, the Broncos have changed coaches. The Falcons should be changing coaches, but just kind of a show of this is why coaches get fired, because they are performing under expectations, not just to the eyeball test, but to actual stats and algorithms and things like that. So just kind of a show there. Now, next what we're going to talk about is a season-long pick. So like I said, we don't have any week 1 picks. Those are pretty much all out. But the season-long picks are definitely something we want to continue looking at, because last year we did have some pretty good success with them. So the 4 season-long bets we had last year, Colts under 10.5, that hit. Lions under 5, that hit. Rams to win the NFC plus 525, so pretty nice long shot hit there. Jets under 6. So if you were playing like a $200 unit size, you would have won over $1,000 with this Rams play here. But all 4 hit. So season-long bets typically do pretty well for us, mainly because there's a lot of studying and projections and things like that I'm doing, and a lot of you guys I'm sure are doing well before the season gets started, and a lot of times even before preseason gets started. If you've been following this channel, we've been talking about week 1 and plays and weeks and all that kind of crap since like early July, if not even prior to that. So a lot of the data that doesn't get plugged in and doesn't move the line until mid to late August, we've already taken the juice out of that, well in advance. So it is a little late right now to be taking season-long bets, but there are two that I do believe still have a pretty decent amount of value. Let me actually go over those with you right now. And this is the only two that I'm on so far this year, and that's the Ravens to win the AFC North and the Eagles to win the NFC East. Both at plus money. Ravens are at about roughly plus 140. Eagles at plus 150. So just to make this real short and sweet, these numbers were better earlier. You can still bet these teams to go over their win totals, but I think the value has been taken out of both of those plays if you want to do it with the win total. Secondly, it's really juiced up. So even if you wanted to go over like the 9.5 wins with the Eagles, you're going to end up paying like minus 150 to take that over, whereas you can just take them to win the NFC East, which if they win 10 games, they are winning the NFC East and get the plus 150 odds instead of the minus 150. Very similar thinking with the Ravens. So why are we picking these teams to win? Well, the Ravens' real competition in that division, assuming that they stay healthy, is the Bengals, of course. The Bengals, if you didn't already hear the video we put out with them, just had a lot of luck kind of go their direction as they were on the Super Bowl run. Played some injured teams, played some teams that are just really not matching up well with them, some teams that kind of gave them some wins, things that they shouldn't have won on their way to winning. Also, just as a prime example, like in the AFC Championship game, they happened to play the Chiefs right after this huge shootout with the Bills. It's definitely a letdown spot for the Chiefs. Now, don't get me wrong, Bengals match up really well with the Chiefs on paper, but just kind of one of those timing things that worked in their favor. They also had an easier schedule last year. A lot of those things, they stayed healthy, very important. Ravens were almost the exact opposite of that. Difficult schedule, massive injuries even before the season started. Some of those guys are still recovering, like a J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and things like that. Their secondary, all four of their starting secondary members were, injured or completely missing by like week 6 or 7 of the season. There's a lot of issues with that Ravens team last year. Lamar Jackson missed time. Some of their line missed time. Just suffered injury after injury, and so that's one thing that should be fixable this year, if nothing else. Aside from that, they should be getting a lot of their running backs back at some point within the season, hopefully sooner than later. The Ravens do match up really well with the Bengals as well when they're fully healthy. The Bengals, main thing I'll tell you with them is that they love running a 3 high safety look, or like a cover 3, which is great when you're trying to stop teams like the Chiefs, and that's why you see them have a lot of success against the Chiefs and the Bills, because they just have the right defense for it. That defense does not work so well when you're playing against a heavy run team, because now you have 3 safeties that are out of the box and kind of playing back for the pass. When you're playing a team like the Ravens, like the Titans, that want to run the ball, that extra little bit of space gives those running backs some room to work with, or gives a guy like Lamar Jackson some easy running lanes, pick up first downs, keep the sticks moving, or kind of just stay in front of the sticks. So, anyways, that's enough on the Ravens. Just to cover the Steelers and the Browns. The Browns, I think, are going to have their issues here with Jacoby Brissett. I mean, I think he's a competent quarterback. I think he can kind of keep them afloat, but he's not going to go out and win anything. And they don't really have a way to compensate for that. I think there's certain players that are going to do really well on that team, but I don't think they're going to have a whole lot of success or be able to exceed expectations with Jacoby Brissett back there. And even Deshaun Watson, I think when he does come back to play, it's going to take him a second to get back into the swing of things. I really, truly thought, and if you had been watching for a second, I really thought that they were going to let him go out there and just kind of sling the ball around like all of preseason long. And for whatever reason, they decided against that. And I think that was just a bad mistake. I think it was dumb. I'm just some idiot with a microphone and the internet. But the guy's suspended for 11 games, and then there's a bye week involved. So he's not going to play for 13 weeks. He already hasn't played for like a year and a half, 2 years now. I gotta believe he's gotta have some sort of actual game time rust. There's only so much you can do at practice to kind of emulate that, and he hasn't really had a chance to play with this team yet as far as like these individual players. I think even if they get him back in week 13, it's probably going to take him the remainder of the season to even get like into the swing of things with his new teammates. That's where I'm at with the Browns. The Steelers, I think, actually have some really good pieces, but I think it's going to also be a transition year for them as well. I think George Pickens is really good. I think Kenny Pickett can be good as far as the quarterback is concerned. This is probably more of a learning year for him. I do expect to see him at some point as a starter for the Steelers. Mitch Trubisky's probably going to start in the first, handful of games to the first half of the season. And then depending on where they're at some point in the season, especially if they're just not being competitive, I think Mike Tomlin looks at his roster and says, you know what, let's give the kid a shot. But aside from him, George Pickens is really good, and right now he's listed as the third receiver on the depth chart behind Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson, I think he's gonna be the number one pretty much no matter what, barring injury. But he does get injured pretty regularly. He's just not a huge guy as far as like NFL players are concerned, and so he'll get dinged up here and there. And even if he doesn't miss like a full game or a stretch of games, he's gonna miss some plays. And so when they're even just running like a 2-receiver set, if he's out for a handful of plays, or maybe they're up and they get pulled out because he's got like a sprain or an issue, he's nicked up, that gives Pickens a decent amount of time to get out there and make some plays. Chase Claypool, I think he's talented, but he just doesn't have it between the ears usually, and so I think that there is some room for Pickens to kind of surpass him and get to the number 2 receiver. And I think Kenny Pickett can utilize these guys. Their offensive line is god awful, and if you watch any of the preseason games, I know we were betting on them for a few of them. The preseason games just showed you even more so that offensive line is just one of, if not the worst in the NFL, like easily bottom 3 for sure. And that's going to be an issue for guys like Najee Harris and for Deontay Johnson, who's maybe going to be running some deeper routes. When Pickens is out there, I do think they're going to probably have him coming out of the slot, and he may benefit from that pressure that's coming right in the face of whichever quarterback is back there. Phrasing. Anyways, with Pickens coming out of the slot, running some slant routes, running some drag routes, it's just some easy completions, kind of like as that emergency valve. I think he's in a prime position to get really easy, really fast targets where he has some room to run after he catches the ball. So I do expect him to have a better season than most people are expecting, but I think he's probably going to come on a little bit slower just because he's not on the field as much, and then maybe pick it up towards the second half of the season. So again, I don't think either of those teams really have what it takes to compete with the Ravens on a season-long basis. So that's why I have the Ravens to win the AFC North. As far as the Eagles to win the NFC East, their real competition is the Cowboys, if you want to call them that. If you don't already know this, I am like a regretful Cowboys fan, but the Cowboys they lost so many pieces in the offseason. They didn't do really anything to replace any of them. If you haven't already heard my conspiracy theory, I really think it is just the Cowboys trying to set up Mike McCarthy to kind of get the boot. If it's any other coach that's the team is really behind and trying to help win, they do something to shore up some of these issues. Like, you lost Amari Cooper very early in the offseason. Zeke is getting older. He's getting slower. You knew that you were losing a lot of your linemen. Now that Tyron Smith is going to be out for the foreseeable future. There's so many pieces on the offense that are missing. Mike McCarthy's not a super talented coach. I think, honestly, he's bottom 5 coach. If bottom 10 if you really want to give him like the benefit of the doubt, but he's just not that great, and he doesn't have what it takes to make a limited team better. I think if anything, he's going to keep them down, and I think he's the reason that they didn't do as well as they probably should have last year with the stacked offense and defense that they had. Last year was a prime opportunity to go further in the playoffs at least, and they just couldn't do jack because they had a coach who doesn't know his ass from his elbow, and that's just the way it is. So I do think that the Cowboys wouldn't be super upset to have a losing record this year, get a high draft pick, have an excuse to get rid of Mike McCarthy, and bring in, a Sean Payton or someone like that. That's just kind of speculation on my end, but just from the X's and O's portion of it, like I said, you're missing all of these players. You haven't done anything to replace them. Your defense is definitely due for a lot of regression. You have a harder schedule this year. It's still the 10th easiest, so it's not super hard, but it is more difficult than what maybe you're expecting. As a Cowboys backer, if you're betting on them, they're favorites in some games that I don't understand why they're favorites. Like the Bengals in week 2, I have no idea why they're the favorites there. So I'm not very high on the Cowboys right now. Aside from that, the Commanders, they have so many issues all over the place. Brian Robinson unfortunately got shot. Hats off to the man. I hope he's okay. But as far as football is concerned, he was probably going to be their starting running back. He was going to be, actually, it sounded like, just hours before the news broke that he had gotten shot. Trey McLaurin is just, he's a good talent, but I don't trust Wentz to get him the ball. Wentz has just had so many issues. He's literally the most inaccurate quarterback in the NFL, and that's not just on deep passes. That's short passes, intermediate passes, deep passes. This guy cannot hit the side of a damn barn, and that's not just me speaking. That's like statistically speaking, he is the most inaccurate quarterback in the league. So I don't care who you give him back there. I don't have a lot of faith in the quarterback, and it just kind of trickles down from there. Antonio Gibson was like a fumble away from entirely losing his job, and now we're supposed to believe he's going to be like the number one guy, get all this work. The coach pretty much wrote him off already, and now he's having to kind of go back hat in hand and say, well, you know what, he's going to be the starter because the other guy got shot. There's just not a whole lot there. They did improve the offense. Logan Thomas, their tight end's coming back. But again, without a competent quarterback or without somebody who can, be at least somewhat accurate, I don't know how great we can expect them to be. The Giants, very similar to the Steelers to me, in that they are very talented. They have a lot of really young, raw talent. I think guys like Wan'Dale Robinson are really good. I think Kadarius Toney, if he can stay healthy, is really great. I think Kenny Golladay is on his way out. I don't think the coaches like him. I don't think he likes being in New York, and it's been pretty much an open secret at this point that Kenny Golladay relationship is just not really working out. So whether it's from the coaches or the player or the agents, whatever, I do believe at one point or another throughout this season, Kenny Golladay is off of that team. Probably through a trade if they can get somebody to take on that contract. Daniel Jones, this is essentially going to be his last shot here at being the starting quarterback. I think they probably do give him the full year to try it out. But if he starts really struggling and they are even remotely competitive in this, weak-ass NFC East, I think they pull the plug on him and let Tyrod get in there. Tyrod's a very competent quarterback. I think he's going to really put some pressure on Daniel Jones, and I think Brian Daboll brought him in specifically because Tyrod Taylor can run the same playbook that Daniel Jones can. They're both, okay, I guess, at passing the ball, but they both have mobility. They both have, ways to extend the play, and that's something that you can take Daniel Jones out. You're not obligated to keep him in there because you're trying to run this maybe option offense. You can put Tyrod in there and let him run the same plays with the same effectiveness. So if Daniel Jones starts struggling, maybe they throw Tyrod in there, and maybe they throw him in there, sooner than later, depending on how much Brian Daboll really likes Daniel Jones. That being said, Saquon is healthy. So like I said, a lot of pros on this team. Kind of some of the negatives, just one, a lot of these guys are really young. Like Kadarius Toney, this is his second year. Wan'Dale Robinson, the guy I'm really high on, this is his first year. Saquon Barkley, we haven't seen him play a full season for since his rookie year, really. Obviously, Brian Daboll is his first year as a true head coach. So a lot of things that are just kind of question marks. I do think they're going to do well. I would actually take the over on them on their 7 wins. But that being said, I don't think they're going to be able to beat the Eagles. I think the Eagles have not just better talent, but more established talent. A coach who maybe has just a little bit of experience over Brian Daboll as far as being the full-time head coach. And the Eagles have just as easy of a schedule. They're both top 5 easiest schedules. So whoever wins between those two, I think, is going to take this NFC East division. And I do think that the Eagles just have more weapons, more ways to attack that Giants defense. The Giants may have the better coach when we look back from the future. They may even have the better defensive coach, but because the players aren't quite there yet, and because they're still kind of, just feeling things out within this first year, I think I'm going to give the nod to the Eagles in this one and say whether they take the NFC East at plus 150. If you're playing a full unit on this, I would not blame you for laying just a couple of pennies on that Giants team to win the NFC East at plus 700. If you're playing a $100 bet, if you take $10 and put it on the Giants, essentially, if you win that Eagles, the Eagles bet, great. You definitely made your money back and then some. If you do win the Giants bet, though, you're really going to come out having lost like $10. And you can kind of fiddle with those dials a little bit if you want to. Maybe put like 25 on the Giants, 75 on the Eagles, somewhere around that, that marker, so that you're kind of, good either way. But the Giants, I do believe, have a real shot to win the NFC East that a lot of people aren't talking about. Now, again, I'm really high on Brian Daboll, so I am a little biased, but I see a pathway for them, especially in a very weak conference and an even weaker division than it is the NFC East. So those are the 2 season-long picks. Hopefully you'll follow me on some of these. Let me know what you think about them below, or in the comments. One last thing I am going to do before the kickoff of the regular season, I am going back to read the Warren Sharp book from this year. If you didn't already buy it, I would buy it as soon as possible. It is on sale for $1 right now. If you go to his website, which is just sharpfootballanalysis.com, there is a promo code which is just BS, and you will get his book for $1. So you might as well go do it. You're going to spend the $1 on something else anyways. Buy the book. Read it. Read the teams that you want to handicap. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to read the 12 teams that we're involved with for week 1, just to kind of reacclimate myself to the changes that they had and then maybe some of their coaching philosophies. But secondly, I'm really looking to kind of narrow down my handicapping, because I know after like week 4, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep track of all 32 teams as things are moving in real time. It's already speeding up. It's already getting a little bit more difficult to keep track of all the teams and all the movements and all the injuries. And as you get into the regular season and we have, a game on Sunday night, a game on Monday night, another game on Thursday night, and there's injury, substitutes, changes, schedule issues, COVID's going to come up at some point in the season, the game's going to be moved, all these different things, and you're trying to keep track of schedules, and it's probably just you really watching your own, gambling habits here. So it is very difficult to keep track of the entire league. So my advice is to pick hopefully 4 teams that you're going to really track closely, and you can extend that out to maybe 6 to 8 teams as you kind of get the hang of it. Usually once you put all the work in up front, get all your stats and data down, and kind of get your spreadsheets down to like, hey, this is what I gotta do, boom, 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 and every night you can go handicap it within like 20 minutes. You'll be able to extend that out to, like I said, 6 to 8 teams, and then as they play other teams and you go back and watch some of that tape, you'll also be able to pick up on some of those other teams' habits. Watch as many games as you can. If you can afford it, I would get the NFL Game Pass, Sunday Ticket, and or the Game Pass. Game Pass, if you don't have a lot of time to watch, weekly games. I know a lot of people love the Sunday Ticket, but if you have kids, if you have a family, you got a job, you got whatever that you're working on Sundays, that may not really be worth it for you, because you're not going to sit there and have 12 hours of time to yourself on a Sunday to sit there and watch every single game. You may be better off just doing the $9.99 a month through the NFL Plus, and that way you can go back and rewatch every single game after it's aired. A lot of my handicapping and my updates get done at 1 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I have time to go back and watch individual games. The condensed replays in like 30 minutes. Super quick, super easy, show you what you need to know, show you what the offenses are trying to do and kind of what the teams look like without having to sit there for 3 hours. So that's my little piece of advice and a way to minimize the time you're doing handicapping, but also make it as efficient and as effective as possible. So again, guys, hopefully some of this was helpful. Hopefully, again, you'll follow me on these picks. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Good luck. Have a good week. I'll talk to y'all soon.